It started with a smirk. Andrew Tate, seated in a sleek black leather chair on the latest episode of his podcast Top Realities, leaned toward the mic, sunglasses glinting under the studio lights. He was surrounded by a panel of yes men, nodding at every exaggerated claim he made about strength, masculinity, and power. Then came the bait. "You know what I find amusing," he said, casually swirling a glass of sparkling water. "They're pushing women into politics like it's a natural fit. I mean, come on. Politics is for men. It's about dominance, strategy, hierarchy. Not feelings and optics." The room chuckled. He continued. "Take Karoline Leavitt. Pretty face, rehearsed lines, all that Gen Z energy. But leadership? Real leadership? That's testosterone territory, not Instagram reels and TikTok clout." The camera panned in close. "I'm not saying she's dumb. I'm just saying she's in the wrong arena." Clips of the comment hit social media within minutes. Some laughed. Others gasped. But Karoline Leavitt didn't post a quote tweet or fire back on X. She called CNN. The next evening, America Tonight announced a surprise debate, Andrew Tate versus Karoline Leavitt, live, unfiltered. The internet exploded. Hashtags trended. Panels speculated. Opinion shows dissected the matchup like it was a heavyweight fight. And when the stage lights came up the following night, the room was electric. Tate strolled out first, smirking, confident, in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. The crowd murmured, some cheering. He threw a wink toward the camera and adjusted his cuffs. Then came Karoline. No flashy entrance. No entourage. Just a sharp navy blazer, firm posture, and a focused stare that cut through the noise. The two sat down across from each other at the debate desk, Anderson Cooper between them, clearly bracing for chaos. Before Cooper could even finish his welcome, Karoline leaned in. Her tone was ice. "You said politics is for men, right?" she asked, locking eyes with Tate. "Tonight, I'm going to show you why that was the dumbest sentence you've said this year." The crowd roared. Tate smiled. But the first crack in his confidence had already appeared. Andrew leaned back in his chair, still wearing that trademark smugness, the same expression he wore on every podcast, every viral clip, every confrontation he thought he controlled. But something in Karoline's tone had shifted the room. The crowd, once mixed with cheers and skepticism, now leaned forward. The atmosphere turned tight, focused. Anderson Cooper tried to regain moderation, but Karoline didn't wait. "You want dominance? Here's a stat for you," she began, eyes never leaving Tate's. "At 25, I was one of the youngest people ever to work inside the White House. Not as a guest, not as a prop, on staff. I earned that, not by flexing muscles, but by outworking every man in the room." Tate chuckled, slow and deliberate. "Cute. But let's not pretend being near power is the same as holding it. You were a mouthpiece. I build empires." Karoline's smile barely moved. "Empires? You sell merch with your face on it and preach to insecure boys who confuse loud with strong. That's not an empire, it's an echo chamber with overpriced hoodies." The audience erupted, cheers, laughter, even a whistle or two. Tate leaned in, his jaw tightening. "I teach men to rise. To dominate. You teach them to complain." Karoline didn't blink. "No, you teach them fear. You dress it up as confidence, but it's fear. Fear of women having voices. Fear of not being the smartest guy in the room. You say politics is for men because you know you'd lose in a world where merit matters." Cooper raised a hand. Let's bring it back to the core of the discussion." Tate cut him off. "Karoline thinks politics is a feelings contest. But when the world gets ugly, when decisions need to be made, it won't be a viral speech or a Twitter clapback that saves anyone." Karoline leaned forward, calm and firm. "You're right. When the world gets ugly, it needs leaders who think beyond themselves. Not fragile egos wrapped in fake bravado. You want to be alpha? Try listening instead of shouting. The audience thundered with applause again. For the first time, Tate's smirk faltered, not gone, but flickering. Cooper sat back. He knew what was coming wasn't a debate anymore, it was a reckoning. Tate narrowed his eyes. You mistake confidence for arrogance. I don't apologize for being bold. That's the problem with your side. Too emotional. Too focused on perception. Karoline didn't flinch. No, she said, voice low and clear. The problem with your side is you weaponize masculinity to silence people. You preach strength but melt when challenged. You say, men lead, well, let me show you what real leadership looks like. She turned slightly toward the crowd, hands poised, voice unwavering. Leadership is standing your ground without needing to tear someone else down. Leadership is making decisions that affect millions, not monetizing self-help slogans with red light filters. You may inspire cliques, Andrew, but I've helped build policy that protects lives. The crowd responded with a swell of claps and affirming murmurs. Tate crossed his arms, visibly irritated but hiding it behind a smirk. You don't get it. I tell men not to be weak. The world doesn't care about your tears. Karoline snapped back. And I tell people not to be bullies hiding behind buzzwords. The world does care about values. About truth. And about people like you being held accountable when your influence damages minds more than it empowers them. Tate straightened up. What damage? I've pulled thousands of men out of depression, out of weakness. Where's your proof I hurt anyone? Karoline tilted her head slightly. You ever wonder why most of your followers are boys trying to impress strangers with money and dominance instead of purpose and empathy? You're not teaching strength, Andrew. You're teaching detachment. You're raising men to hate women for being strong. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Anderson glanced at his notes, then back at both of them, realizing control had officially slipped. You say you build men, she continued, now fully in control of the room. But strong men don't fear strong women. They stand with them. Silence. Then, slowly, loud applause. Tate opened his mouth but stopped. For a beat, he was silent. It was a rare moment. And Karoline owned it. Tate adjusted in his chair. The smirk returned, but it wasn't effortless anymore. It felt calculated. Like he needed to remind himself who he was. You act like I'm the villain, he said, leaning into the mic, but I didn't make this world cutthroat. I just refuse to lie about it. If that makes me dangerous, good. Because weakness gets people killed. Karoline calmly folded her hands. No, she said, her voice composed but with a growing fire beneath the surface, what gets people killed is reckless ego. Blind ambition. Men who believe the volume of their voice makes them right. She paused, just enough to let the silence sting, then added, men like you. The audience stirred. A few gasps. A few murmured, wow, s. Tate clenched his jaw. You still don't get it. I've been locked up, cancelled, dragged through every media pit, and I'm still here. Because people know I speak truth. Karoline leaned slightly forward. And yet the truth you claim to speak always centers you. Always elevates you. Always mocks others. But here's a real truth, Andrew, if your strength depends on someone else being beneath you, it was never strength to begin with. The audience roared. Anderson Cooper looked up, visibly stunned, clearly not expecting this level of moral artillery on live television. But Karoline wasn't finished. I've sat across from world leaders, she continued, negotiated in back rooms, defended my beliefs without needing to belittle someone to make my point. You call me soft because I don't yell? That's not softness, it's control. Tate laughed, but it sounded thinner now. Control? That's cute. Try running a room full of alphas who don't care about your college degrees or credentials. Karoline shot back instantly. Try walking into a room full of people who doubt you the second you speak. People who assume your intelligence is a fluke. Your authority a handout. And winning anyway. That's power you can't measure in gym reps or follower counts. The crowd stood. Not just clapping. Cheering. Andrew leaned back. A flicker of something in his eyes, not anger. Maybe, just maybe, respect, or fear. Karoline turned to Cooper and simply said, "Next question." Anderson blinked. "Yes," he said, almost breathless. "Let's move on." Anderson Cooper shuffled through his notes, his voice cracking just slightly as he tried to bring some structure back into the arena that had become a verbal battleground. "Next question," he said, "let's talk about leadership, what defines it, who earns it, and what it looks like under pressure." Tate didn't hesitate. Leadership is about fearlessness. It's about commanding respect, not asking for it. I've built a brand, a following, an empire, without needing anyone's permission. Karoline didn't interrupt. She let him talk. She wanted him to. When he finished, she spoke slowly, each word laced with purpose. And yet the loudest man in the room is usually the most terrified one. The room hushed. Anderson blinked. Tate's eyes narrowed. "Commanding respect isn't about domination," she said. "It's about accountability. You say leadership is being feared. I say it's standing tall when no one's clapping, no one's watching, and still choosing what's right over what's popular." Tate exhaled, visibly annoyed now. "You think people respect you more than they fear me?" Karoline gave the faintest smile. "Respect doesn't vanish when the lights turn off. Yours will." The audience let that sink in. Then came a slow build of applause that morphed into a full wave. The crowd wasn't just reacting, they were shifting. Tate shook his head, almost laughing. "This is why the world's soft. Too much talking. Not enough winning." Karoline cut him clean. "If your version of winning means demeaning, mocking, and manipulating, then yeah, I'll take talking. Because unlike you, I don't build myself up by stepping on others. I rise with them." The applause that followed wasn't noisy. It was sustained, like the crowd knew they'd just heard the defining words of the night. Tate tapped his fingers on the table, pacing internally, unsure whether to lash out or recalibrate. Karoline, by contrast, sat still. Strong. Centered. The stillness was her armor. Anderson glanced toward the camera, then back at the stage, realizing something rare was happening. One voice was overpowering the other, not with volume, but with conviction. "Let's take a break," he finally said. "No," Karoline replied. "Let's finish this." Tate turned, facing her fully now. The game had changed, and he knew it. Tate leaned forward now, elbows on the table, as if sheer physical proximity could give him back the power he felt slipping. His tone turned harder. "You think your resume makes you bulletproof? I've been to war with the media, governments, entire nations trying to shut me down, and I'm still standing." Karoline's expression didn't move. "I don't think I'm bulletproof, Andrew," she said. "I just don't need to act like I am." The crowd stirred again. Her delivery wasn't theatrical, it was surgical. "You mistake resistance for relevance. Just because the world pushes back doesn't mean you're right. Sometimes, it just means you're reckless." Tate scoffed. "You wouldn't last a day doing what I do." Karoline countered, "Because I wouldn't waste a single day doing what you do." The crowd laughed, and it wasn't nervous laughter, it was sharp, affirming, aligned. Something was turning. Tate's voice lowered, more dangerous now. "You're popular in rooms like this. TV studios, think tanks. But in the real world? I win. I connect with men who feel lost. That's power." Karoline nodded slowly. "You could have used that connection to heal." to guide, to empower. Instead, you sell bitterness disguised as strength. And the saddest part? You actually think it's helping. Anderson Cooper didn't dare interrupt. He simply sat back and watched. Karoline continued, voice calm but pressing. You built a throne on the insecurities of men. But when you leave the room, those insecurities don't go away. They just get louder. Because you didn't teach them how to fix anything. You just taught them who to blame. That struck deep. Tate opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. He defaulted to sarcasm. So what's your answer, then? Hugs and therapy? No, Karoline said instantly. My answer is responsibility. Self-respect. Real purpose that doesn't require punching down. You call that soft. I call it sustainable. The room went silent. Then a single clap. Then more. Then it rose, an avalanche of approval. Tate leaned back, clearly on defense. And Karoline? She wasn't even trying to win. She already had. Andrew Tate shifted in his seat. The crowd's energy had changed, and he could feel it, like the tide turning against a ship that once ruled the waters. He tried to reclaim control. You act like I'm the villain, Karoline. But I never claimed to be a saint. I speak to the ones nobody else speaks to, the forgotten men, the angry ones, the ones your polished world ignores. Karoline nodded, not mocking him, not dismissing him, but not conceding either. And that's exactly the tragedy, she replied. You had their ear. And instead of lifting them, you lit a fire under their resentment. You gave them rage instead of reason. Pain instead of purpose. Tate straightened. I gave them a voice. You gave them a target, she shot back. That line landed hard. Anderson Cooper shifted forward slightly, but stayed silent. He knew to let it breathe. Karoline continued, her words colder now, refined like steel. You think you've cracked some code by telling men to be louder, harder, crueler. But strength isn't cruelty. And masculinity isn't a license to bully. Real leaders build bridges. You just build barricades. Tate's jaw clenched. What do you build, Karoline? Talking points? PR statements? You sit in suits and call that leadership? Karoline smiled, genuinely. I build futures. Jobs. Policy. Laws that change lives. I don't need a mic drop moment, Andrew. I'm not performing. I'm participating. The audience was silent. It wasn't hesitation, it was awe. Tate looked toward the crowd, then the camera, trying to find a line that would pierce the shield she'd built. But none came. Karoline didn't gloat. She didn't grin. She simply said, You think politics is for men? Then maybe that's why it's so broken. Because you mistook control for wisdom. Power for vision. Noise for leadership. Anderson finally spoke. We're going to take a final break before closing statements. Karoline turned toward Tate one last time. And if you still think women don't belong in leadership, look around, Andrew. You're not leading this room anymore. Tate said nothing. Not because he wasn't allowed. But because, for once, he had no answer. When the cameras returned from break, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The energy wasn't just charged, it was settled. The audience knew what they'd seen. Something rare. Something decisive. Anderson Cooper cleared his throat. We're now moving into final remarks. A chance for each of you to speak directly to the people watching at home. Andrew Tate leaned in first, trying to project confidence, though the edges were frayed. People say I'm controversial, he began. But controversy follows truth. That's why I speak plainly. I speak to the men who've been told they're toxic for being men. I give them permission to push back. And if you hate me for that, fine. I'm not here to be loved, I'm here to be honest. He looked toward Karoline, smirk forced. You think politics is some polite dinner party. I think it's a war. And I don't show up to war with a smile. There was scattered applause, more polite than passionate. Karoline sat still. Her turn. When she spoke, it wasn't loud. But it landed like thunder. I'm not afraid of war, Andrew. I just know the difference between a battlefield and a broadcast. The audience leaned in. You say you speak for men. I don't speak for anyone. I speak to everyone. Because leadership isn't about domination, it's about trust. It's about showing up not just when there are cameras, but when there's chaos. When things are broken. Her eyes narrowed slightly, voice tightening. You built a brand on being unbreakable. But real leaders don't pretend to be made of steel. We show up as we are. Strong. Flawed. Human. The room was utterly still. Not a cough. Not a phone. Just attention. Karoline's tone sharpened. Don't mistake the silence of a woman who listens, for weakness. That silence is a weapon. And tonight, it was the sound of you losing the room. She paused, letting the weight drop. No overacting. No smug smile. Just presence. Anderson finally broke in. That concludes our program. But he didn't need to finish. The crowd stood. Not in chaos. Not in frenzy. In recognition. Karoline Leavitt had just taken the mic from one of the loudest voices in the world, without raising hers once. And that, more than anything Tate had said, would be what the world remembered. By the time the broadcast ended, clips had already begun circulating online. TikTok feeds flooded with the moment Karoline calmly said, "You gave them a target." Twitter, or rather, X, was erupting with hashtags, hashtag Tate silenced, hashtag Karoline wins, hashtag real strength. In the green room, producers whispered to one another like they'd witnessed a political earthquake. Not just because of what was said, but how it was said. Karoline sat alone, calm, sipping water, her phone vibrating non-stop. She didn't check it. Not yet. Across the hallway, Andrew Tate paced. He wasn't used to silence. Especially not his silence. A Fox News reporter approached him. "Do you regret tonight's appearance?" He forced a grin. No such thing as bad press. But the grin didn't reach his eyes. Meanwhile, CNN immediately queued up a replay of the exchange. Commentators, usually divided, agreed on one thing: Karoline Leavitt had shown a version of leadership that didn't just challenge Andrew Tate, it cornered him. And not by yelling. But by staying centered. Social media wasn't just reacting, it was realigning. Even some of Tate's usual defenders were posting things like, "Karoline came armed with more than talking points, she came with spine." One viral clip showed Tate blinking repeatedly after being hit with her line about giving men a target instead of purpose. The caption read, "That's the moment he realized she wasn't playing his game, she was rewriting it." Late that night, Karoline posted a single message on X. "Loud doesn't mean right. We showed that tonight." It racked up millions of views within an hour. Andrew Tate? He posted nothing. For once, the king of noise had nothing left to say. And somewhere in the quiet, Karoline Leavitt didn't celebrate. She prepared. Because if tonight proved anything, it was that the world had just seen a different kind of power rise. One that doesn't scream. One that doesn't need to. As the sun rose over a reimagined digital landscape, the aftermath of the debate had already become part of America's ever-shifting political mosaic. Commentators, influencers, and even celebrities couldn't help but embark on their own analyses, each one trying to decode the intricate tapestry that had unfolded live on air. Karoline Leavitt didn't orchestrate a takedown in the traditional sense. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't rely on theatrics. What she delivered was something far more enlightening, a kind of leadership that beckoned a deeper reckoning. It wasn't just a clash of ideas. It was a clash of identities. Clips of her now iconic words, "You gave them a target. I give them purpose," wove through the kaleidoscopic labyrinth of social media like an anthem. Even those who had never heard her name before were pulled into the verdant field of political awakening she had subtly cultivated. Some said she transcended the moment. Others called it the beginning of a new era, one where conviction outweighed charisma, where truth didn't need amplification to resonate. Meanwhile, Andrew Tate faded, not in stature, but in influence. The tapestry he had spun for years, threaded with defiance and bravado, had been pierced. Not with anger, but with clarity. The conversation had shifted. Forever. As Karoline walked out of the studio, her silhouette framed by the dawn's golden hue, a reporter called out, "What's next for you?" She didn't stop walking. But her answer echoed behind her like a riddle only time could solve. To lead. Where real strength lies. And just like that, a new kind of story began to intertwine with America's destiny, one not told by those who yell the loudest, but by those who carry the heaviest truths with unshakable grace. The tapestry had been rethreaded. And it was Karoline's hands that held the needle. What started as a clash of ideologies became a lesson in real leadership. Karoline Leavitt didn't just confront Andrew Tate, she dismantled the myth that volume equals value. In a world obsessed with dominance, she showed that strength can speak in whispers, and still shake the room. If this showdown made you think twice about what true power looks like, hit that subscribe button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and share this with someone who needs to see it. Because the war of words is far from over, and next time, the stakes will be even higher. Stay loud, stay sharp, and stay tuned.